given me 15, and we're going to include a song in there. So my story, at least my musical journey, it starts whenever I was just 5 years old. My mom would tell you that I would bring my Bible to church and I would strum on it like a guitar. And I don't remember that, but that's what she would tell you. And I have no idea why, after they saw me strumming on my Bible like a guitar, they're like, hey, let's put him in some piano lessons. It just didn't make sense to me. And so here I am just a few years later, and I am, painfully learning the piano, because I did not want to learn the piano. Anybody play the piano out there? Anybody? Okay. No offense to the one person. I did not like playing the piano at all. It was like 2 weeks of it, and then I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I think the crazy thing is that the piano teacher saw a musician inside of me. He pulled my parents to the side and he said, hey, you may not see it, he definitely doesn't see it, but the kid's a musician. So whenever he finds his instrument, nurture that. And it was a few years later, whenever I was wanting to get my first job. I was 15 years old. I wanted to get my first job because I wanted to get my driver's license, or at least my driver's permit. And my mom said, well, if you want to drive the family car, you have to get a job because gas isn't free. And then if we're going to add a 15-year-old to our insurance, Jonathan knows about insurance. Where you at, Jonathan? Yeah, Jonathan knows about insurance. But my mom was like, if you want to be on the insurance, if you want to drive the family car, you're going to have to get a job. And I think it's very interesting, growing up in church my entire life, whenever I got my first job, is around the time that I got my first guitar as well. Got my first guitar that Christmas. My parents gifted me a guitar because I could not put down the guitar that my best friend has. I drove him nuts, drove all of them nuts, because every time I go over there, I'd pick up the guitar, and this is the way I kind of imagine it. I imagine it, my friend complained to his mom, so every time Justin comes over here, he plays my guitar. And then maybe his mom went to my mom. And that's kind of how I imagine it happening in my head. And so, age of 15, I got my first guitar, and I think it's quite interesting how, like I said, I grew up in church my whole life. I think it's interesting how whenever the guitar gets put in my hands, what I've been called to do. Whenever I got my first guitar, that's when I got my first job, and I started getting introduced to a completely different crowd than what I was raised around, which were other kids in church. So now I'm getting introduced to kids that are going to eventually steer me off this straight and narrow path that my parents have spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of time on their knees praying for this one of 6 kids that they got. I'm right in the middle. And I was probably the biggest heathen of them all. And so here I am, 15 years old, got my first guitar, get my first job. Only a couple years of being in my first job, I started getting mixed in with the wrong crowd. 2 years into that, I'm smoking, I'm drinking, I'm having sex with every girlfriend that I have, I'm getting addicted to pornography. I am going down a deep, dark hole, spiritually, mentally, physically. And so now, I start breaking and entering with these so-called friends, the people that I want to fit into their group, right? I want to fit into their circle. And at the age of 18, right after I graduated high school, I'm standing before a judge. Because my mom did not teach me how to be a good criminal, y'all. The first time I broke the law, boom, got caught. And so here I am standing before this judge, 18, just 2 months after I graduated high school. And this judge looks at me and he's like, what are you doing here? I've never seen you before. You don't have a record? Like, why don't you tell me about yourself a little bit? I mean, what judge does that, right? Why don't you tell me about yourself a little bit? So I started telling him how I'm one of 6 kids, homeschooled my whole life, been to church my whole life. And he was like, who brings in the income? Does your mom, your dad, your mom stay at home? So when my dad brings in the income, my mom stays at home. He said, here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to slap you with a misdemeanor what you've done, you deserve a felony and to go to jail for the next 2 years. That's what you deserve. But I'm willing to hit you with a misdemeanor if you will promise me to show up for community service and join a branch of the military. And so there I am at 18 years old, signing up for the Navy for the next 8 years of my life. And I don't know if we have any veterans in the house tonight. We got some veterans. Thank you for your service. You can probably relate to this. My recruiter lied to me. He said, any recruiters in the house? I'll say it again. My recruiter lied to me because he said, hey, the Navy Seabees, no, they don't go overseas. They don't go to Iraq or anything like that. And I was like, cool, I'm just trying to skate by for the next 8 years. I'd like to tell you that I signed up because I wanted to serve my country. But that wasn't the case the first year or two. So by year 3, here I am in Iraq, 2007, in the sandbox fighting for the very same freedom that I took for granted. And it was on a Wednesday night about halfway through my deployment, whenever I'm thinking, that guitar, my hopes and dreams of doing music is completely out the window because of the choices that I have made. I'm not close to God anymore. I am the furthest from home, physically and spiritually. So here I am, thousands of miles from home, thousands of miles from my guitar, my hopes and dreams, on a Wednesday night, and I get this little tug on my spirit to go to the chapel on a Wednesday night. I haven't been to church in a long time. Haven't spoken to God in a long time. And on a Wednesday night, whenever there's just 12 of us in that Wednesday night service, the chaplain asks, anybody here play the guitar? Anybody here know how to lead worship? And I'm thinking, not this guy. Not this guy. I'm closing my eyes, crossing my arms, thinking I'm not raising my hand. I open my eyes and he's looking at me because I'm raising my hand. Tell me how that happened. So then I call my dad to ship me my only guitar all the way to Iraq. And there I am leading worship in Iraq. And I'm thinking, there's no way that God has been pursuing me this whole time. And so I go home and I finish out my enlistment. I get married in 2013, and my enlistment in 2013, 2015. I quit my job. I start pursuing music full time. Start continuing to do music, releasing music. 2020 comes around. Everybody knows what happens in 2020, right? We don't have to say the C word in the room. 2020, I was about to release a new CD called Anchored. And I was going to go out on the road and go out on tour and encourage people, hey, where do you find your hope? What anchors you in this life? Do you know how to be still and know that he's God and we're not? Psalm 46:10. That was my plan, and then COVID happened. Oops, I said it. COVID happened, and then I'm as a musician, as an entertainer that requires gatherings of people. They're like, no, you can't do that. And so now I feel like I'm stripped from my calling. And I find out that Justin does not know how to be still and know that he is God and I'm not. Thankfully, there were some churches out west. I wish they were a little bit closer to home, but everything between Texas and Nevada canceled on this tour. And this one church in Carson City, Nevada, they said, hey, Justin, if you can get here, we're going to do this. You're going to lead worship. If you can get here, we know it's a long way. And I said, well, there's like 4 other churches out in the Northwest that's willing to still do this during COVID and maybe do events outside. And they said, if you can get here, get here. And so I hit the road in 2020. In the midst of fear, in the midst of chaos. I mean, you guys remember, right? The riots out in Seattle, out in Portland. The cities were on fire, cars were on fire, people were rioting. And I'm out here in my van driving around like, Jesus loves you and me. And Now the crazy thing is that all of 2020, I did not write one single song because I felt discouraged. I felt stripped of my calling, like I said earlier. And I remember feeling very, very alone on this tour. And I was leading worship in California, and I remember it wasn't wildfires, just natural wildfires. It was fires that people were starting. I was leading worship outside at this church, and ash is falling on my microphone. And I'm thinking, Lord, I know that you have a plan in all this. I mean, look at all the things that you've brought me through before. And this is what the Lord tells me. He said, Justin, I brought you to this place because what breaks my heart doesn't break yours. And I knew that there was an issue in my heart whenever the Lord told me that, and it didn't affect my heart. I just thought, oh, what breaks your heart doesn't break mine? Okay. And then the next thing I know, the next 2 weeks of events canceled. And I'm staying with these people in Northern California with nowhere to go, nowhere to be, a couple thousand miles from home. And I said, all right, Lord, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this guitar and I'm going to sit here